Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hayley Spira-Bauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. What started as a happenstance meeting in a coffee shop in New York City at New York Ed Tech Week has now led to an incredible first-time guest on the podcast. We have Chris Bennett, an engagement architect, as he calls himself, here on Learning Can't Wait. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm thrilled you're here, and I have to give a shout out because my dear friend and former colleague, Bibi Morrissey, introduced the two of us just kind of in passing. But subsequent to that conference in October, we've kept up on LinkedIn, and I feel honored that you're sharing your time with our audience today and talking a little bit about what gives you excitement and your passion in education.
Thank you. It gives me joy just to talk about it.
Anything that gives other people joy as it relates to improving the lives of kids is something I want to talk about. So let's jump in. And why don't you start off by telling everybody how you came to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
Okay, that's a big question. I have always been a very curious person, was super shy growing up, so I was always surrounded by books. I was always reading. I was always trying to make connections between things. I think that curiosity led me into my professional life. I started in the video game business years back, first as a producer and then as a designer and a creative director. And I got to work on some amazing titles. I got to work on The Sims when they were starting to go online. I got to run the Diner Dash casual franchise when it was blowing up. And it was super seminal experiences that millions of people got to play together. And yet I got to experience watching people play these things in person and got to see how meaningful they were to their lives. And it provided a real kind of cause and effect, or maybe kind of more of a comparison between this exciting engagement that they were having in person and then other things like school and work they're really disengaged with. And it really made me think about that. And I started consulting about 14 years ago because I want to pull myself out of video games and see what I had to say about other areas. Started consulting with places like American Heart Association and AARP and some startups around health and education. And I found myself in the back of this Stanford classroom. Someone had invited me to Professor B.J. Fogg's persuasive technology class. And it was so unlike any classroom I had ever been in the Midwest, where I went to this big university. And it made me super curious. I started having a lot of coffee meetings and lunches with people, started getting invited to guest lecture about what I knew around games. And next thing you know, I found myself affiliated with the Graduate School of Education at Stanford, which I've been doing for the past 10 years, getting a chance to teach these amazing grad students who are really building the future of technology and the future of education, and getting to learn a huge amount from them. And then also getting to work with these amazing clients like Quizlet and like Google Research, I hope we'll have a chance to talk to later. But I think that basically I'm just a very curious person and I soak up a lot of different things out there and try to find connections that are useful. I think of myself as a scientist and that I find a lot of atoms that are out there and find ways to connect them into interesting molecules to solve problems.
Okay, Chris, I said this before on the podcast, but maybe you haven't heard those episodes because they're like deep in season 2. But the two values that my husband and I hold most dearly in our kiddos is empathy and curiosity. I think so much of the disengagement crisis, the peer pressure issues, the confusion about future plans in children and growing adults comes from a lack of curiosity. And that's like my hypothesis that I have from my years in K-12. But hearing you speak to how curiosity has driven you forward gives me a little bit more evidence that I'm on the right path with raising my own kids. I hear you speak about all these different ways that you've collected your own information to form a hypothesis about engagement. What would you say is your manifesto, the thesis of your manifesto about the topic of engagement?
That's another good question. I think that there's this assumption, especially in education, that engagement and learning are the same thing. And they're very much not the same thing. When someone engages with something chemically or biologically, it means that they're paying attention to it, and it means that they're leaning into the experience. But it doesn't mean that they are necessarily learning something. The other interesting part is that there's this assumption that engagement and motivation are the same thing. And they're two very different things. And maybe we can talk about motivation a little bit later as well, because I used to assume that it was this on off switch. Either you were motivated to do something or you weren't, and it wasn't. And so I think it's important to unpack those things and to say, just because you have a child in school who is quote unquote engaged with something, it doesn't mean that they're going to change modalities and leave the classroom and have any better understanding of it. There's a whole kind of framework in science around how we actually learn.
Oh, wait, you need to dig more into this. So now I need you to go back to the engagement and motivation. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So it's not an on and off switch. What
Mhm.
is it then?
Motivate. So this was a big aha moment for me because when I was making games and even after that, I always thought, well, either you're motivated to wash the dishes or you're not motivated to wash the dishes. But then I started digging into self-determination theory, which has this amazing motivation continuum and actually has 6 different types of motivation. And it runs all the way from amotivated, which is you literally couldn't be paying me to do this, and it goes all the way up to what we've heard of intrinsic motivation, which is I would be doing this if no one was watching. But most people are in the middle and they're in a type of extrinsically motivated, and maybe they're motivated by rewards or by avoiding punishments, or maybe they're motivated because it means something to them and they can see why it would be meaningful either to themselves or to others. And I suspect that with most people, it's kind of a bell curve. There aren't a whole lot of people who are amotivated, and there aren't a whole lot of them who are intrinsically motivated. They're mostly somewhere in the middle. So when I work with clients and organizations, we really try to find ways to bucket their different users, students, whoever they're working with into these different pillars. Because if you think about it, like I design incentive systems for a living. And if I design an incentive system and expect it to work on someone who's highly motivated and someone who is motivated to a lesser extent, they literally aren't going to work. And you have to design in different incentive systems for different motivated people. And I think any classroom teacher who has experience is going to internally understand that. But there's
Yeah.
also a huge cognitive switching between students or cohorts of students who are motivated in different ways. And I think there's some science behind this that can really help with it. And I'm hoping that AI will help to enable that a little bit. Not to replace the teacher. I don't like AI replacing teachers. I like AI augmenting teachers and augmenting the learning that's happening in a classroom or frankly, the learning that's happening at home. I think often there's far more learning happening inside of the video games that kids are playing when they go home in the afternoon than is actually happening in the classroom.
Oh, I feel like that's a pause moment right there.
I'm all
I
about
agree.
I'm all about the provocative statements
I mean,
and
that is great. But no, I agree. So actually, I have two questions. This is like how you know I'm a curious person too, because I'm like, what question do I ask first? I have so many going through my head right now. First is, and you may not know the answer to this, this is not a gotcha, but do you know if that continuum of motivation has any correlatory or causational relationship with the maybe like the spectrum of learning disorders and or like how kids function with disabilities in a classroom? Is there no overlap? Is there some overlap? Like what does the research tell us?
I'm not an expert in that area, and so that'd probably be a better question for someone who is.
Okay, fair. I appreciate that. I just immediately went to that thinking about you mentioned the diversity of motivation in a classroom, and it immediately gave me this beautiful parallel to the diversity of capacity or skill, various skill or even the needs of kids within a classroom and how beautifully diverse that is, and how it is the teacher's job to identify and attend to that continuum within a classroom. But then I guess I'll ask you, given your deference on that particular question, what you think are some of the most common mistakes in school or ed tech when they try to design specifically for motivation?
I think that a lot of ed tech products are not designed for motivation. They're trying to design for engagement. I think that motivation is something that people don't even understand is something that you can design for. And so what they try to do is say, we have this material that's not very fun. And if we just make it fun, that kids are going to want to engage with it. And you're familiar with the term of gamification,
Of
right?
course.
It's adding points and badges and levels to things. And the interesting part of that is that I don't dislike gamification. I just understand very directly the limitations of it. And it's actually useful for onboarding people who aren't very motivated to do something because you are incentivizing them and you are giving them kind of immediate dopamine rewards and kind of reasons for doing something. The problem is that when you're trying to move someone to the right on the motivation continuum to somewhere that's more attached to their own goals and aspirations, you need to kind of make that fade into the background a little bit. If you think about how a video game works, a good video game has three different types of rewards. It has immediate rewards that are happening in the moment, right? You duck out of the way of the skeleton and the skeleton doesn't hit you, right? Or you're driving in Mario Kart and you pick up a power up. Those are very immediate rewards that are happening. And then you have medium term rewards, which are I'm trying to clear out this castle and get the big chest. Or in Mario Kart, I'm trying to finish these 5 levels so I can unlock a new card. Those are medium term ones. And so you're working on those at the same time. And then there's the long term ones, which are I'm trying to go through the storyline in this video game, or I'm trying to unlock all of the characters in Mario Kart. And the problem is with most education, formal education, we think as parents and as educators that we have that system all in place. We have the long term, which is we're going to get you through K through 12, and then you're going to be able to go to a university, a college, maybe a trade school, maybe straight to some work, right? Doesn't matter, but we're preparing you for that part of your life. And then we have the medium term rewards in that every year you get to go to another grade. Oh, you're a freshman? Now you're a sophomore. That's amazing. And then we have the short term ones, which are you're getting through your quarters or your semesters, and we're giving you this feedback on your homework, right? So from our adult perspective, we've built it like a video game and it should be amazing. But the problem is that kids don't care about any of that.
Yeah. It basically sounds like those motivations are tied to time versus achievement or like success or anything that furthers their well-being. Because in most schools in America, there's this concept of social promotion too. And so you have kids that are progressing through grades without mastery, or without increasing their ability or capacity on a particular skill, subject, or idea.
Yeah, I was at the Common Sense Media Summit this week, and there was a great presentation that was made that was talking about in the past 50 years, the past 100 years, there have been all these amazing technological and really societal changes that have happened in the United States and the world. But then you look at what a classroom has looked like over the past 50 years, the past 100 years, and it is shocking unless you're in a super well-resourced private or public school somewhere, it basically looks exactly the same.
Oh, yes.
It is the you're graded based on schools are graded based on how many kids are in the classroom and how many hours their rear ends are in those seats, whether they're making
Time.
it to their grade level, and right, it's by time,
Yeah.
and the assessment that's done is done very formally in a very strict structure, and increasingly has nothing to do with the reality of lives for a 17-year-old kid, a 12-year-old kid, even a 7-year-old kid. It has nothing to do with the realities of their lives outside of the classroom. And so we're expecting that they're going to step into this magic circle, right? There's this concept of Huizinga's magic circle, which is once you step inside this circle, the normal rules don't apply, and that we're willing to kind of play along with it. Like if you go to a movie theater, you're not going to go to a movie theater and pull out your laptop and get on a Zoom call,
Mm.
right? That's kind of breaks the kind of social contract that we have there. You go in there and you've accepted that for 2 hours superheroes exist. And when they do silly and stupid stuff, you're going to laugh and you're going to gasp when the CGI is amazing. But then you walk out and you go back to your normal life. We're expecting that kids and young adults are going to walk into a classroom, into a school, and there's going to be this magic circle of education going on. And they walk in, for most of them, and I have a high schooler, for most of them, they walk into school and it's the worst part of their day,
Mm.
right? And that's a sad thing for me because
So sad.
one of the parts of engagement is not just empathy, but it's vulnerability. And to give your best self, you have to be vulnerable and you have to be willing to show your true self. And I think for most education and institutions, we kind of have to put this mask on, similar to what we have to do at work. But the social structures are even, I mean, the social structures for middle school are far worse than any corporation I've ever worked at, right? And so it basically de incentivizes us to be vulnerable. And it's basically telling us, you shouldn't engage with this right now.
Oh my gosh, all I can picture are like the stories my kids tell me every single day. Again, for folks that listen to this podcast, they're probably really well aware that I have a lot of concern about this incredible public school my kids go to, incredible in quotes here, and the ways that they're learning just are antithetical towards curiosity and excitement and engagement. They have moments, right? Like I hear stories that like have glimmers of hope, but in general, it's this like time-based progression that feels so disconnected with fostering a love of learning, which to me supersedes anything. I tell my kids all the time, like, I don't actually care what they got on the test. I care like when they got a question wrong, like, do you know why? Are you curious to know why and figure out like where did they catch me on this particular question and how can I beat it next time? Like how could I, think faster, like over, it's like that's what I want. Um, so I'm not surprised to hear you say this. And I need you to tell me, like, where are the bright spots? Who or what ed tech tools or universities or colleges, where do you see it happening in a way that gives you so much hope?
Well, first of all, I love schools and I love school. Our kid goes to, frankly, an amazing high school that he can walk to. But I'm also aware that within the structure of that school, it basically falls to the individual teachers
Yeah.
to make the magic happen because they're fighting
Mhm.
against the structure that they're inside of that was based on preparing people to work in factories for the rest of their lives. Like that's what the
Right.
modern educational structure was built for, and it hasn't really markedly changed. Um, I see some bright spots with technology being utilized in the classroom, not to replace pedagogy, but to enhance it. I'm aware that there's a big pushback against ed tech, against technology in the classroom right now.
Yes.
I'm not unaware of that. Um, I think that a lot of that has come from kind of promises being made of if you use this in your classroom, these test scores are magically going to get better. But I think there's some super bright spots. There's this amazing collaboration between Google Research and the Stanford Accelerator for Learning. And they've created this thing called AI Quests that I was brought in as a game designer to work on. And it's for 11 to 14-year-old kids to teach them about AI. And it was interesting because when I talked to them first, I said, most kids get taught don't cheat, don't deep fake your friends. And that's the extent of their AI education. All
Hmm.
of their AI education happens at home, talking to their friends, watching
Yeah.
TikToks, kind of using that type of stuff. But what Google and Stanford really wanted to do is to create something that I wouldn't really call it a game, but it's game-like and it's very playful. And it's a set of fun quests to teach about the global affordances of AI, about how it helps with blindness prevention in parts of the world, around flood forecasting, for people who live in areas where floods would adversely affect their whole village. Things like how do we start to learn and fully map out the brain, knowing it's going to take 500 years? What if AI could help us do it in 5 months? What would that be like? But kids get to actively help with the storyline and figure this out. The other interesting piece about how it works in a classroom is that it's bookended. Instead of just being an experience that you do in the classroom, they start out with these amazing teacher materials that teachers can use to prepare themselves and prepare the classroom for it. They do a quest for 20 or 30 minutes, and then they get to watch a short video with real Google scientists, right? And it shows them like, oh wait, this wasn't fake. This wasn't like a video game. This is like it's actually happening. It's a real thing. And so it goes back to the curiosity piece. I think for most people, their sense of engagement is how many kids engage with this? How many classrooms did we get into? How many quests were completed? For me, the far more important one is the curiosity piece. If your kid uses AI quests in the classroom and never talks about it again, I see that as a big loss. If they use it and they come home and say, Mom, why do some people get blind in certain parts of the world? Don't they just go to an optometrist or to their doctor? That's curiosity. That's an opportunity for you to say, huh, I don't know about that. Maybe we could find a YouTube video to watch on it. Hey, I didn't know you could map out the brain. Like, what does that actually look like? I don't know. Let's go to the library and like check out some books or check out some videos about that together. It's that curiosity that leads you from the classroom and into back into the real world, out of the magic circle, that I think is the really critical piece of education.
Not to reduce this to numbers, but is there a way to measure that from your perspective?
I think that many people are not really aware of that, and so they haven't really built assessment tools. I had a behavior design expert on my podcast, the Engagement Architect podcast last year, and he taught me about this thing about big E and little e engagement. That was fascinating to me. Little e engagement are things like how many signups did you get? Did people come back after 5 days? Did they flip that switch on the screen that you wanted them to? And those are interesting, but those are metrics. The big E engagement, or for when working with places like American Heart Association, did somebody actually do the thing to make themselves more heart healthy?
Hmm.
So this big E version of this is once they learned about this affordance of global AI, did it make them more curious to learn more, to act more? I think you could do those assessments. You just have to look beyond the basic classroom assessment and think about something deeper and be able to get access to these folks over time. But I think it's like a big blue ocean for assessment right now.
Yeah, that's helpful to hear. I sometimes question the ways in which we are reporting on various tools in education and the impact they're having. The metrics like often feel very vanity based versus rooted in teaching and learning and other what we sometimes call soft skills, which I do think are explicitly important now more than ever before. If we already know that in 30 years, a lot of the rote repetitive tasks that workers do can be done by AI, our soft skills, our ability to see people, understand people, relate to people, build on ideas and thoughts is going to be even more important than it is right now. So, like measuring that feels like a logical next step.
Can we talk about that for a minute? Because that's a
Yeah,
huge
please.
that's a huge piece of passion to me. What used to be called 21st century skills or soft skills, people are referring to as durable skills now.
Hmm.
America Succeeds has a great framework for durable skills right now. They have like over 60 different skills that they're tracking. And there's folks like the Alliance for Decision Education that are
Yes.
also thinking about things like judgment, agency, empathy, and probabilistic thinking. I got really interested in this with video games several years ago because I was consulting with a company in Austin called Kinjo, and they
Okay.
wanted to see the learning that was happening inside the games that kids were already playing. So much to my kid's chagrin, when he went to school every day, I would sit at home and get paid to play Roblox games, hundreds of them. I played through these games to track kind of how complex the game was. Some Roblox games are super simple, and some of them are kind of approaching Minecraft in their complexity, but
Sure.
also to try and track what sort of durable skills could be practiced inside these games. Does this game have elements of complex problem solving, of collaboration, of creativity in it? And so with the team, I helped create a rubric to kind of track those things so we could have a dashboard both for the kid who is playing their Roblox games through Kinjo, but also for the parents, right? Because parents, for the most part, have zero interest, or excuse me, have zero idea what goes on when their kids play Roblox or Fortnite or any other game.
It's like a binary opinion that they'll have. It's either good or bad, right? But there's so
Right.
much more to it, to your
There,
point.
there's so much to it. My nephew Miles is a really good Fortnite player, and when I listen to him play with his friends, and they just talk over their Xbox, and I listen to them play through, I can hear them practicing these skills as they play.
Sure.
And then
Sure.
when they're done with their match, they pause and they talk about things. And then he's like, and then mom says, okay, you got to stop playing on the Xbox now. So he goes downstairs and gets his iPad and watches videos about
And then
Fortnite,
he communicates with nobody.
right? So he can in turn, but if you look outside the social structure of that and you look inside the learning structure of it, he is experiencing something. He's
Mm.
communicating with his team in real time. He's talking to people about it afterwards. And then he's reaching out to find more information online so that when he circles back and plays it again, he'll be a more informed player. We
Ah.
can have opinions as parents or educators about whether that is good time or bad time, but you can't really make the case that there's no learning happening there.
Okay, Chris, this is so, again, I bring everything back to my personal life, but I had a moment a year and a half ago when I interviewed the New Jersey, State New Jersey Esports Collective. I interviewed the head of that, as well as a student who's a part of it. His name is Andrew Abramson. His dad is Evan Abramson, who's a education leader in K-12 in New Jersey. And I had a moment where I was like, I need to reevaluate my relationship with my child and their video games. Since then, I have made a concerted effort to pay more attention. However, you just caught me in exactly what I'm still doing wrong. I started to belittle your nephew going back into YouTube watching videos, which is what my son does. He plays Zelda with his friend on YouTube because it's not a streaming game. He plays it not on YouTube, excuse me, on FaceTime. They talk the whole time. He
Mhm.
hangs up and either opens his Zelda book, which I'm fine with, or goes to YouTube and watches videos, which I'm not fine with. And I clearly am not connecting that to the depth of pedagogical, like you said, the cycle of him like deepening his understanding, his curiosity. I'm still learning here, Chris, and I'm so appreciative you're helping me see that.
We talk about how kids have no attention spans and about how attention spans have lowered. I think the science about that is kind of picking and choosing at things. I don't think that that's really changed that much. I think that what we're giving kids pedagogically and experientially in schools and even at home is just so boring to them and uninteresting to them that they're looking for something that's more quick hits of something. But if a kid will watch a video about something for 2 hours or read a Pokemon book for an hour and a half to learn about Pokemon, right? It's not a short attention span. It's that we're not providing them with something that they feel is engaging. So then why would they engage with it?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
It's
that
not
makes
on them, it's on us. We're the adults in the room.
I'm this conversation I could have for days. I'm already like, I have other questions. I want to connect and double click on something you said a moment ago. You just quickly referenced the Alliance for Decision Education. And I just have to pause because someone invited me to hear Dr. Annie Duke speak last year. It blew my mind. I have gone down the deepest rabbit hole trying to learn about what Alliance for Decision in Education is doing, but also just the general arc of her writing, her thinking, her
Mhm.
speaking. I think that's a moment that I just wanted to pause on because a lot of educators may not be familiar, like I wasn't, with the work that's happening out of there. And it is so cool and so interesting and exactly the type of teaching and learning I wish were happening robustly in schools today. What did you say? Can you just repeat for me a little bit about how you've interacted and worked with them before?
I met their head of education in New York when I was there in October, and I've been fortunate enough to have some further conversations with them. And I find the folks there to be super fascinating because they're really thinking about how young people make decisions and about how they can make better decisions. And I
Mhm.
mentioned some things like judgment and empathy and agency and probabilistic thinking and forecasting. These are interesting skills that are transferable, right? If you learn judgment in one area, you can transfer it to another area, which isn't always the case with some skills that we learn. And I've just found them to be a wealth of information about where kind of education for kids is going. I think
Yeah.
deeply about how we can AI proof kids as much as
Yeah,
we
let's dig
can.
into that a little bit. I know that's something you've talked about before. What does that mean? How do we do it?
I think AI proofing is, for one thing, not trying to put a wall. Like, years ago, people put up a wall with the internet. Like, well, if we just act like the internet doesn't exist, and we just tell kids they can't get on it, then it's going to be okay. And, strangely, that wasn't the case. And, 30 years before that, it was calculators. If we just act like calculators or computers aren't a thing, then they'll just go away and we won't have to worry about it. And people are doing the same thing with AI right now. Can be very binary about it, of just accepting that AI is a real thing. It is amazing now. I think that most parents and teachers and principals and school district leaders don't realize that your average high schooler could take their whole curriculum and feed it into Claude Cowork right now and get an entire lesson plan that would be digestible in 1/10 the time and do 75% of a good job teaching, right? And they could do that like literally right now. They could
Sure.
do that. So, accepting that AI is a real and powerful thing and that it's flawed, I think is important. I think also AI proofing means that uh, Sam Altman has said that he thinks that before we have general intelligence for AI, Sam Altman of OpenAI, that before we have general intelligence, we'll have general persuasion, which means that AI will be able to persuade us of things.
Wow.
And if you think about the things, kind of politically that we're starting to attach AI to, that's kind of scary.
Terrifying.
So that means that the people who are growing up now are going to need to have better judgment skills. They're going to need to have more. It's not just about, oh, is there an extra finger in that photo and is it fake? That's useful, but we're thinking of things much deeper than that, of looking at conversations online, looking at, even when we look at comments on a LinkedIn post, of saying, is that true? Is that true? Is that being modified? Is that really the kind of a fact? I think that is a super important thing that's being eroded right now. And I think that there's kind of a framework I've been working on with my collaborator, Margarita Kiwis. And this framework is building on the work of others, which is that if you think about concentric circles, there's three different types of work. And we can think about this with learning as well. In the middle, there's the core things that we do, the super, super important things. There's the adjacent things, which are kind of sit outside of it. And then there's the peripheral things. And the things that are core to what we do, whether it's in work or in learning, those are the things that AI shouldn't touch,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, Decisions about family relationships, decisions about what is going to happen with core parts of your work, decisions about the relationship between you and your teacher, kind of pedagogically. Those are core things that you shouldn't touch with AI. The things that sit outside that are adjacent that you can identify, those things are great for augmentation. I'm a big fan in using AI as a superpower, not to replace humans, but to make humans more powerful, to make them just like Superman, right? To make them faster and powerful and a little bit more bulletproof from all the stresses that come in. And then there's the peripheral things. Those are the things that you do all the time. Those are the things that you should be automating with AI if you can. Because when you automate those peripheral tasks with AI, you're giving yourself more time to augment the adjacent things, and you're giving yourself more time to really think deeply about the things that are core to your life. And it's easy to say, okay, well, that AI framework doesn't work for kids because it doesn't really attach itself to a school. But at some point, kids have to step outside of a school. They may be going to college, they may be going to a trade school, they may be taking a gap year, they may be taking an internship somewhere. They need to go out into the real world, and we can't act like we're keeping kids in this K to 12 structure where everything is all perfect and then we boot them out the door, because that doesn't serve them very well.
I once again agree with you completely. And feel like we're going to have to get another episode on the books to talk about this in more detail because we're already at our time. But I do think it's relevant to hear your perspective, given all that you study, all that you think about, all the super smart people you're connected with, to just know what advice would you give a teacher who's starting their career today, Chris?
A teacher who's starting their career right now is a pretty scary place right now,
Mm,
right? I think that having a very, very firm sense of who you are as a person and why you're in that classroom. For most of the teachers that I know, and I'm a teacher as well, I am there to serve the students. The structure that happens around it is the structure that you have to deal with, but you're there for the students. And every decision that you make as a teacher should be around that. Adding technology to the classroom, in many cases, is a good thing. In some cases, it's not such a good thing. The technology should be there to give you time back, to afford more rich conversations and connections with your students, and to augment the learning that's happening. And AI is simply a different piece of educational technology. You don't really deal with it any differently. But I think the core part, and I know some teachers that are still pretty early in their careers, and I tell them, just really be very clear about who you are and where you want to go, because your students are watching you. They, whether they say it or not, they're taking examples from you and how you act and how you think through things. And it teaches a very powerful thing, whether it's a senior teaching seniors in high school and they're scared about what's going to happen next year if they go to college, or whether you're in transitional kindergarten and these kids are like, this is the first time I've been around a bunch of other kids and they're I don't know about this whole thing, right? And all the beautiful and wonderful and messy things that happen. School is such a messy thing, but it can also be such a beautiful place. And it's a beautiful place because of the teachers.
Chris, you have been so delightful. You've made me even more curious about a host of topics. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your beliefs, your interests, and just your general enthusiasm for this topic.
Thank you, Hayley. It's been truly a joy for me.
And thank you to everybody for tuning in to today's episode of Learning Can't Wait. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.